draw that hammer, and I'm going to draw it in two different styles, this half and this half. So I'm just going to draw the head of the hammer here, the working part. I can see my proportions are already off, but I don't care. I don't need, this is not, it's not meant to be perfect in that way. I'm going to draw it this way. This is the interesting part. God damn it, this is the boring half. How am I going to draw it differently? Maybe I'll divide it here, this and this. I live in an artist building full of artists, and the artists are variously skilled. I mean, we're all good, but some of us prefer to draw in a certain way or paint in a certain way. We're all over the map when it comes to our output and our theories about how we do what we do. But there was one guy that lived here who, like me, loved drawing in black and white with pen and ink. And we were both sort of realists. He was more surrealistic. I was more realistic, but we drew in the same realistic way. Except and everyone would confuse our drawings with one another, and I thought, how is this possible? We draw so differently. And we saw that we drew differently, but they did not see that. But the difference was, he was a crosshatcher and I was a hatcher. So this, I will channel the cross-hatching here on this half of this dotted line, and the hatching I will do here for my part. So they're both essentially the same idea. You draw the shadows, the value differences by the number of lines you put down on the page. The more lines you use in an area, the darker it gets because it's overlapped. And the so for cross-hatching, you apply the lines, you add your hatch marks, and then you take a different angle to make it darker, cover it up, and then you want it darker still, you add another angle and another angle. So you're sort of creating a screen of line work. And the line, you're not just doing this, because that turns into just, something the cat coughed up. No, you don't want that. You want the lines to be parallel and enough of them so it looks like it's a shadow you're drawing rather than scratches in a, if you draw cross-hatching and the lines are too far apart like that, hatching or cross-hatching, they look like stripes or scratches or something rather than a value. Hatching, on the other hand, you make it darker by either having more lines together, closer together, or you use thicker lines, or both. So I'm going to draw this from here to here as with cross-hatching, and from here to here with hatching. And I'll show you the values of both. Usually with, why didn't I need to fill this pen? Let me just use a different pen. I'll use this pen. This is slightly finer, but it still has some flexibility to it, and it has ink in it. So an area that is flat, like the head of the hammer, you draw with parallel lines like this. And then an area that maybe isn't flat, where it curves, like the slight beveled edge, you can draw like this. And where it's dark, you draw your cross-hatching. And then you've got this cylinder, and the highlight is here in the upper half here. And so you would draw cross, 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 or rather hatch, 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 and then you'd add these things. Now with cross-hatching, and then here where it's the darkest, you might have 3 levels of hatching. Now one of the things that I'm doing here that you don't have to do is I'm having some of these lines parallel to the surface. You know, they're either going this way or they're going this way. They follow the curve. I'll show you better when I do this. So here we have, again, we've got this part of this facet is dark, and that gets a little bit lighter. So it's all sort of dark like that. This is similarly dark. This is similarly dark. That's a little lighter. But this area here is darker. So the crosshatcher would add darkness there. And then this area is darker here, so you press down and add more. Right. Anyway, this is how that works. Badly, as you can see. I mean, I'm doing it badly. A real crosshatcher would do it better. And I'm not. Let me just finish it a little bit more here. So anyway, you get this various levels of shadow and shade and darkness by applying different layers of overlapping line work. I prefer to draw by hatching. So I make parallel lines, and I usually pick a facet, a shape, and I'm doing a longitudinal line here. So the line, if this was all one color, the lines I would make would all be parallel to each other and following this curve. It's not all one color. There's a slight lighting area there, and then it gets dark again up here at the top. So rather than overlapping with different layers, I'm just pressing down harder. This area has a slight curve still going this way, and because I now am, this direction is going to be for this entire face now. That's the direction I've chosen. So this will end up looking like that. Now there's a slight highlight right here where the metal is slightly bent or curved, and then there's this light edge right along there that will stay light, and I've sort of screwed it up there. So by adding parallel lines, and if this area is kind of dark, so I would maybe, I would draw it with more pressure to get this sort of slight curve suggested. Now, here are 2 facets that I'm going to draw differently. Here I drew longitudinally, and here I'm going to draw latitudinally. So it's darker at the top edge, it's a little lighter at the bottom, but I'm going to be drawing this way. And here it's sort of dark, and I'm lightening up my stroke as I go down, as well as lightening it going this way. And then down here, finally, we do the same thing, except this is slightly darker, I think. And then here, it's lighter. So, and then if I want an edge a little darker, which it is here, I might go back and add a second set of lines that way. So anyway, what you get, the difference between the two, is I think the hatching conveys the direction of the grain, we'll call it, of the surface. Cross-hatching, you know, you're getting mixed messages. Is it this way? Is it this way? Is it up? Is it down? Cross-hatching, though, you don't have to have any of them follow a particular line. It could be more randomized. Maybe when there's only one layer, you won't want it to be similar to how I'm drawing this. Another issue that you have with cross-hatching is these moire patterns that happen, these disturbance patterns. So let me just make sure I've got ink enough to show you. So if you cross directly across like that, you have this very boring looking screen, and you don't really want that. So you want it at an angle. But what happens when you have it at an angle is you end up getting sometimes you get these moire patterns. You see there's these lines that are sort of implied that go this way, where the two lines meet. Let's try to draw it better. Sometimes that's a really neat thing that happens, but it may also be disruptive. Let's try to draw it here. I'm gonna make these lines slightly arced so you can understand. Come on. Well, you see it at the ends where they're too close together. You see these lines like that. You see them over here. And sometimes that's a really neat effect to get. And sometimes you're doing it and all you see is those lines, and it sort of ruins the drawing you're doing. Anyway, cross-hatching and hatching. And I'm a hatcher. There are people that can do both, and they do both very well. Charles Dana Gibson can do both. Henry Flagg, whatever his first name is. Something Montgomery Flagg. He's able to. It's really nice looking at how these people draw folds in fabric. You know, a guy's pant leg here with creases. Here's a knee, let's say, and you know he's not wearing striped pants, but the line of the pants is longitudinally, and then in here there's, you know, he'll throw these. Both of these people would throw, Flagg and Gibson would have these weird things going off at the side. And drawing drapery with hatching or cross-hatching is really fun. So anyway, I'm hungry. I don't have any food in the house to eat. Hatching and cross-hatching. They're very different from one another. They both require, I think you need to be consistent in how you do both. I think for hatching it's more important to have the lines that you use to sort of be either perpendicular or parallel to the surface you're drawing. You know, if you were drawing this pen, if you're drawing this pen, this cylinder, you can either draw it with lines that go this way, or you could draw it with lines that go like around. You have to curve the lines. If I just drew straight lines like this, you wouldn't have a sense of it being curved. It would look flat. So you sort of have to follow the shape of the thing. Now if I were to crosshatch that, same thing. You know, I'm using the lines become less descriptive of the surface and more descriptive of the value. So for crosshatching, the line isn't required to do two things. I think you're translating light and dark by hatch marks and cross-hatching. With hatching, I think you also have to, you're drawing both the lights and darks, but you're also representing, in a way, the surface, curvature of the surface, I think. So hatching, you're hatching in a way might be more difficult in that way, because, or more limiting, maybe that's the better word. Not difficult, it's just limiting. You're sort of forced to have part of it represent a direction of a shape. And for a hammer, maybe that's important. For a gob of, if I was drawing this gob of fabric, maybe because there is no up or down with fabric, the hatching wouldn't have to go in a particular direction. You can just pick any direction at random. But you sort of have to be consistent, even if it's random to begin with. Hatching or cross-hatching. And it's not even 7 o'clock in the morning. I think it's 6. It might not even be 6. I should be sleeping. What is wrong with me? You can add your comments in the comment section. You just tell me what's wrong with me. Thank you.